I'm gonna tell you this the way it really happened, not the clean version people like to hear. Because life didn't warn me. It didn't ease me into it. It smacked me upside the head when I least expected it. That morning started like any other tired, slow morning a woman my age has learned to accept. I'd just come back from the doctor, knees aching, heart feeling heavy in that quiet way it does when you've lived long enough to know something's always coming. It said, "Mom, Vanessa and I are traveling to Miami. Don't call, we want privacy." No goodbye, no explanation, no timeline, just that. I stood there staring at it, my hand shaking slightly, not from fear at first, but confusion. Miami? On a Tuesday? With no warning? No ride arranged for me? No groceries stocked? No check-in call planned? My son, Ryan, used to text me if he was going to be late getting milk. Now he vanished across the country, like I was some stranger renting a room in his house. That's when my stomach dropped. I didn't panic right away. I wish I could say I did something smart immediately. But the truth is, betrayal sneaks up soft before it cuts deep. I reread the note 3 times, hoping I missed something, hoping there was a joke hidden in the words. There wasn't. I walked down the hallway toward my bedroom, each step heavier than the last. My house felt different, like the walls were listening, like the air itself knew something I didn't. The safe was behind my closet door, tucked low where I'd kept it for years. Ryan knew about it. He'd helped me install it after my husband passed. He said it was for my peace of mind. I knelt down slowly. My knees protested. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I spun the dial. Nothing. I tried again. Wrong. My fingers started to tremble. I punched in the numbers I'd used for over a decade. The ones burned into my memory. The ones I could enter half asleep. The door clicked open, and my world collapsed. The shelves were empty. No envelopes, no bundles, no backup cash. Just cold metal staring back at me. 10 years. 10 damn years of saving. Every skipped vacation. Every maybe next time. Every penny I tucked away so I'd never be a burden. $200,000. Gone. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I didn't cry like they probably imagined. I just sat there on the floor, my back against the wall, staring into that empty box while something inside me went quiet. Not broken, not shattered. Cold. Because in that moment, everything clicked into place. The sudden kindness. The fake concern about my memory. The whispers I overheard, but pretended not to hear. The way Vanessa watched me like I was already halfway gone. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was slow. They thought age made me blind. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that 6 months ago, when I first felt something was off, I didn't confront them. I prepared. I let Ryan believe I was fading. I let Vanessa believe I was confused. I let them think every lie landed clean. I stayed quiet on purpose. Because when someone plans to steal your life, you don't warn them. You let them finish building the trap. I closed the safe, stood up slowly, and walked back into the kitchen. The note was still there, mocking me. I peeled it off the fridge, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my pocket. Then I picked up my phone. Not to call my son, not to beg, but to make the first call that would change everything. And as I stared at the empty house, I whispered to myself something they never expected me to say. All right, let's do this. Because Ryan and Vanessa thought they were flying to freedom. They had no idea this was the moment their downfall officially began. And the next step I took would make sure they never spent $1 of my money in peace. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying. Not because I was pacing the floor like some helpless old fool. I stayed awake because my brain was working sharper than it had in years. People think betrayal breaks you instantly. That's not how it really goes. First, it freezes you. It turns your blood cold. And once you're cold enough, you start thinking real clear. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold hours ago, staring at that stupid fridge magnet mark where the note had been. Every sound in the house felt louder than usual. The tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant car passing outside. This was the same house where I raised my son, where I wiped his nose, stayed up all night when he had fevers, skipped meals so he could have better shoes for school. And now, that same son had cleaned me out and flown off to Miami like I was already dead. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. And once I admitted that to myself, all the little moments from the past 6 months lined up like puzzle pieces I'd been pretending not to see. Vanessa asking weird questions about my accounts. Ryan suddenly insisting I relax and let him handle my finances. Them laughing quietly in the living room when they thought I was asleep. The way Vanessa started calling me sweetie instead of my name, like I was a child. I wasn't imagining it. I was being hunted. And the worst predators don't rush. They wait until you trust them completely. That's when I made my second call of the night. Not to the police. Not yet. I called Arthur. Arthur was my late husband's old friend, a lawyer who'd seen more ugly family fights than I could count. We hadn't spoken in years, but when he heard my voice, he knew something was wrong immediately. "Margaret," he said, "you don't call this late unless the house is on fire." "It is," I told him, "just not the kind you can see." I didn't dump everything on him at once. I told him enough. About the money, about the note, about my gut screaming that this went deeper than theft. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he said something I'll never forget. "If they stole from you, they've already committed a crime. If they manipulated you first, we're dealing with something much bigger." That's when the plan started forming. Arthur told me to do the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. "Act weaker," he said. "Let them believe you're slipping. Let them get careless." So that's exactly what I did. When Ryan called the next morning from Miami, I answered like nothing was wrong. I let my voice shake. I asked the same question twice. I pretended I couldn't remember where I'd put my purse. Vanessa took the bait immediately. "Mom, you okay?" she said in that fake sweet voice. "You sound confused." I smiled to myself. Perfect. From that day on, I became the version of myself they expected. I misplaced things on purpose. I forgot conversations on purpose. I asked the same question again and again until I could see the irritation behind their smiles. They thought age was finally winning. What they didn't know was that every single word they said around me was being written down. Dates, times, phrases, names, plans. I even bought a little recorder and kept it tucked inside a drawer they never checked. I recorded the whispers, the arguments, the jokes about nursing homes, the disgusting comments about how long I'd probably live. One night, I heard Vanessa laugh and say, "Once we get everything, she won't even know what hit her." Ryan laughed with her. That laugh killed something inside me for good. Weeks passed, then months. They grew bolder, sloppier. Ryan started talking about selling assets. Vanessa Googled luxury condos in Miami right in front of me, not even bothering to hide it. They had already spent my money in their heads. And then came the lie that told me everything. Ryan sat across from me one afternoon, eyes all serious, hands shaking just enough to look convincing. "Mom," he said, "I need surgery. It's bad. I didn't want to scare you." Surgery. I asked questions. He dodged them. I cried on cue. Vanessa hugged me like she was comforting a child. That night, I called Arthur again. "He's lying," I said. "I know," Arthur replied, "and liars always push for paperwork." 2 days later, Ryan brought home documents, power of attorney, asset transfers, all dressed up to look legal. I signed, not because I believed him, because Arthur had already rewritten everything, with protections buried so deep they didn't even notice. From that moment on, it was no longer just a theft case. It was a setup. And while my son and his wife were booking flights, shopping for swimsuits, and dreaming about beachside dinners, I was counting down the days. Because the money being stolen wasn't the end of the story. It was the bait. And the next move I made would make sure they walked straight into consequences they couldn't run from, no matter how far Miami was. And they were about to make one fatal mistake, trusting that I was still blind. By the 3rd month, I wasn't acting anymore. I had fully stepped into the version of myself they wanted to see. The forgetful old woman who smiled too much and asked too many questions. The one who needed help with passwords. The one who mixed up dates and names. The one people talk over instead of listening to. Funny thing is, when folks decide you're weak, they stop hiding who they really are. Ryan started calling less, but when he did, his tone had changed. "Less, how are you feeling, Mom?" And more, "Did you remember to sign that?" Vanessa barely looked at me anymore, unless she needed something. She'd stand in the doorway, scrolling on her phone, barking instructions like I was hired help instead of the woman who raised her husband. I let it happen. I nodded. I apologized. I pretended I was grateful. Inside, I was watching everything. I noticed how Ryan always left the room when he took certain calls. How Vanessa suddenly had new handbags and expensive shoes she hadn't had before. How they talked about Miami like it wasn't just a trip, but an escape. A fresh start without me slowing them down. One afternoon, I accidentally knocked over a stack of mail at the table. Papers went everywhere. Vanessa sighed loud and dramatic. "For God's sake," she muttered. "This is exactly what I mean." Ryan didn't defend me. He just rubbed his temples and said, "Mom, we've been over this. Ye need to be more careful. That one stung more than I expected. Because when he was 5 years old, he spilled an entire pot of soup on my kitchen floor. And I cleaned it up without a single complaint. I kissed his head and told him accidents happen. Now I was the accident. That night, after they went to bed, I went through the trash. Not because I was desperate, because I was curious. Receipts, boarding passes, bank printouts they thought I wouldn't understand. Miami, luxury hotel, 2 weeks. They weren't planning on coming back anytime soon. I sat at the table until dawn, lining everything up, writing dates in a notebook Arthur had told me to keep. He called it my timeline. I called it my proof. A week later, Ryan brought up the idea of a care facility. He said it gently, like he was breaking bad news to a child. "Mom, we've been worried about you," he said. "Your memory, your balance, your confusion. We think assisted living might be safer." "Safer for who?" Vanessa chimed in right on cue. "Just temporary, sweetie, until things stabilize." I looked down at my hands and let them shake. "If that's what you think is best," I whispered. Their relief was instant. Too instant. That's when I knew this wasn't concern. It was strategy. They wanted me placed somewhere quiet and out of the way. Somewhere I couldn't check accounts or ask questions. Somewhere my voice wouldn't matter. I agreed to everything. Every appointment, every evaluation, every signature. What they didn't know was that Arthur had already spoken to the doctor, that the tests were being documented, that my confusion was noted as reported by family, not observed. Vanessa didn't bother hiding her impatience anymore. "You forgot again?" she snapped one morning when I asked what day it was. "We literally just talked about this." Ryan didn't correct her. That silence told me everything. Then came the call from Miami. They were already there. I could hear music in the background, laughter, glasses clinking. Vanessa sounded relapsed. Ryan sounded proud. "Everything's handled, right?" he asked casually. "You're okay?" "Oh, I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." "That's normal," Vanessa said quickly. "Don't worry about anything." I almost laughed, because by then, I knew exactly where my money had gone. I knew the accounts it touched. I knew the transfers, the dates, the amounts. I knew which laws they broke without realizing it. I even knew the name of the condo they were staying in. They thought distance made them untouchable. That was their biggest mistake. The last straw came when I overheard a voicemail Vanessa forgot to delete. She was talking to someone else, bragging. "She doesn't know a thing," she said, laughing. "Once this trip's over, we're done playing nice." I sat there, holding the phone, long after the message ended. Not angry, clear. That night, I packed a small bag of my own, just essentials, documents, copies, my notebook. I placed everything neatly by the door. I didn't leave yet. I stood in my bedroom, looking around at the life I'd built. The photos on the wall. The memories they thought they could erase with a plane ticket and a lie. They believed the story was already over. But I knew better. Because while they were posting beach photos and ordering room service, people were starting to ask questions. And once questions start, answers follow, whether you like them or not. By the time their Miami photos started popping up online, I had stopped feeling sad altogether. Sadness is what you feel when you still hope people might surprise you in a good way. I was past that. I was steady, focused, clear-headed in a way that only comes after you accept the truth. Ryan was smiling in every picture. Big grin, sunglasses, arm wrapped around Vanessa like they just won the lottery. Fancy dinners, poolside drinks, hashtags about finally living. Every single photo felt like a slap. Not because of the money, because of the ease. They weren't worried. They weren't looking over their shoulders. They weren't acting like people who'd done something wrong. They looked relieved, free, like a weight had been lifted the second they boarded that plane. That weight was me. I kept playing my part. I liked how comfortable they were getting. Comfort makes people sloppy. Ryan called every couple of days, always rushed, always distracted. He'd ask the same surface questions, barely listening to the answers. You eating okay? You taking your meds? You remember what day it is? I answered slow, soft, sometimes wrong on purpose. Vanessa, on the other hand, stopped pretending completely. When she got on the phone, she talked to me the way people talk to customer service. Impatient, clipped, annoyed if things took too long. One night, she said something that told me exactly how they saw me now. "Ryan, just handle it," she snapped in the background. "I don't have the energy for this. Handle it." Like I was paperwork. Like I was a loose end. After that call, I sat in the dark living room with the TV off, just listening to the house breathe. That's when I realized something else. They weren't just stealing my money. They were erasing me. They'd already rewritten the story in their heads. I was forgetful, confused, a burden, a problem they solved by distance and silence. And once people decide you're less than human, they justify anything. That same week, Arthur came by the house in person. He didn't announce it. He just showed up with a calm face and a folder thicker than a phone book. We sat at the kitchen table, where I used to help Ryan with homework. Arthur laid everything out, piece by piece. Bank trails, account authorizations, voicemails, screenshots, medical notes, timelines. "This isn't just theft," he said. "It's financial abuse. And the fact that they convinced you to sign while presenting false medical claims, that matters." I asked him the question that had been sitting heavy in my chest for weeks. "Do they know how bad this is?" Arthur shook his head slowly. "Not even close." That gave me a strange kind of peace, because for the first time since finding that empty safe, I knew something they didn't. They were building their future on sand. Meanwhile, things at home got colder. Neighbors noticed Ryan and Vanessa hadn't been around. People asked questions. I answered honestly, but softly. "Oh, they're traveling," I'd say. Needed some space. I didn't accuse. I didn't rant. I let curiosity do the work. People talk, especially when something feels off. Then came the call that changed the tone completely. Ryan sounded nervous. "Mom, did anyone contact you? From the bank?" I paused, just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Well," I said slowly, "there were a couple letters. I wasn't sure what they meant." Dead silence. Vanessa grabbed the phone. "What letters?" "I don't know," I replied. "Something about unusual activity." Her voice sharpened. "Did you call them?" "I don't remember," I said. That was the first time I heard fear in her voice. From that day on, the calls increased. Texts, too. Messages asking what I'd said, who I'd spoken to, whether I'd signed anything recently. I answered inconsistently. Sometimes I replied right away. Sometimes hours later. Sometimes not at all. Letting them sit with uncertainty felt better than any argument ever could. Then, one evening, Ryan slipped. He was tired, irritated, probably drinking. "Mom," he said, his voice tight, "you didn't tell anyone about us taking the money, right?" There it was. Not borrowed, not managed. Taken. I said nothing. "Mom," he pressed. "I think you should rest," I replied quietly. "You sound stressed." He hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. Not shaking, not crying. Certain. Because once someone admits the truth out loud, even by accident, they can't take it back. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because things were resolved, but because the illusion was gone. They knew something was wrong now. They just didn't know how wrong. And while they were scrambling to control a story that was already slipping out of their hands, paperwork was moving, calls were being returned, and decisions were being made without their permission. They still believed distance protected them. But distance doesn't stop consequences. It just delays the moment they catch up. By the time Ryan and Vanessa started panicking, I had already crossed a line I could never uncross. And I want you to understand something real clear. That line wasn't revenge. It was survival. For years, I protected my son from consequences. I smoothed things over, made excuses, paid little debts quietly. Told myself, he's just going through a phase. He'll grow up. He'll come back to who he used to be. But that boy, the one who used to bring me dandelions and say they were gold, he was already gone long before the safe went empty. Once I accepted that, everything changed. The calls from Miami got sharper, shorter, more aggressive. Vanessa didn't even bother hiding her irritation anymore. "Mom, you have to answer when we call," she snapped one morning. "This is important." "Important to you," I thought. Out loud, I said, "I'm trying, honey. I've just been tired lately." She sighed like I'd personally ruined her day. "Just stay available, okay?" Available. Like a phone charger. Like a resource. Like something you plug into when needed. After that call, I sat down with my coffee and stared at my reflection in the microwave door. Gray hair pulled back. Lines around my mouth deeper than they used to be. But my eyes, they were clear. I wasn't confused. I wasn't weak. And I sure as hell wasn't finished. That afternoon, Arthur and I met again. This time not at my house, but in his office. He closed the door behind us and spoke without sugarcoating a thing. "Margaret," he said, "once we move forward, there's no quiet resolution. This will involve banks, investigators, possibly criminal charges." I nodded. "I know. And it will involve your son." "I know that too." He studied my face for a long moment. "Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer right away. My mind went back to Ryan at 7 years old, holding my hand crossing the street. To Ryan at 16, slamming his bedroom door. To Ryan at 35, stealing my life savings and flying to Miami like it was a victory lap. "I've been ready longer than I want to admit," I said. Arthur slid a document across the desk. A formal report. All I had to do was sign. My hand hovered for just a second. Not because I doubted my choice, but because I finally understood the weight of it. Signing meant I stopped being the shield. Signing meant Ryan had to stand naked in front of the truth. Signing meant I chose myself for the first time. I picked up the pen and signed. The moment the ink dried, my chest felt tight, then lighter than it had in years. That same night, Ryan called again. This time, no fake concern, no polite tone, just pure frustration. "Mom, what did you do?" he snapped. I leaned back in my chair. "What do you mean?" "The bank froze accounts. They're asking questions. They said there's an investigation." I let the silence stretch. Vanessa grabbed the phone, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You promised you wouldn't talk to anyone." "I never promised that," I said calmly. "You're ruining our lives," she shouted. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was unbelievable. "No," I said. "I stopped letting you ruin mine." Ryan's voice cracked. "Mom, please, we can fix this. We'll pay you back. Just call them. Say it was a misunderstanding." There it was again. Not remorse, damage control. "I don't misunderstand empty safes," I replied. The line went dead. After that, everything moved fast, but not loud. That's the thing people don't tell you. Real consequences don't arrive screaming. They arrive quietly, dressed in paperwork and timelines and official-looking envelopes. Detectives called. Bank representatives scheduled meetings. Statements were taken. Evidence stacked up like bricks. And through it all, I stayed calm. Because once you stop hoping someone will change, you stop bleeding. Week later, Arthur called me early in the morning. "They're coming back," he said. "Back where?" I asked. "Miami to here, tonight." My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. All I felt was this strange, steady certainty. They thought their coming home would give them control again. They thought I'd panic, beg, backpedal. They didn't realize that home wasn't their safe place anymore. It was mine. And when they walked through that airport, expecting relief, they were about to learn what it feels like when the ground disappears under your feet. The day they flew back felt strangely ordinary. That's the part nobody warns you about. How the biggest moments of your life don't come with thunder or dramatic music. Sometimes the sun is out. Sometimes the coffee tastes normal. Sometimes the world looks exactly the same while your entire life is about to split open. I woke up early that morning. Not from nerves, from habit. I made my bed, fed the cat, watered the plant Ryan bought me years ago, back when he still pretended to care if I lived or died. I even hummed while I worked, which surprised me. Peace will do that to you. Arthur had already told me what was happening, but not the details. He said it was better that way. Less room for doubt. Less room for guilt to sneak back in. "They'll land around 4:20 p.m., he said. "That's all you need to know." I didn't ask anything else, because here's the truth. Once you've done everything right, once you've told the truth and protected yourself, the ending no longer belongs to you. It belongs to consequences. Ryan texted me around noon. "Landing later today. We'll come by the house after. We need to talk." No apology, no explanation, just assumption. I stared at the message for a long moment, then locked my phone and set it face down. I wasn't available anymore. Around 3, I took a long shower. Let the hot water hit my shoulders. Let it rinse off the years I spent shrinking myself so my son could feel bigger. I put on clean clothes. Nothing fancy, just comfortable. Clothes worn by a woman who no longer needed to prove anything. I sat at the kitchen table afterward, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and memories kept drifting in, whether I invited them or not. Ryan learning to ride a bike. Ryan crying over his first breakup. Ryan standing in my doorway years ago saying, "Mom, Vanessa thinks it'd be easier if we handled the finances." I didn't push those memories away. I let them pass through me. Because loving someone doesn't mean you have to let them destroy you. At exactly 4:38 p.m., Arthur called. "They've landed," he said. That was it. No drama, no build-up, just 3 words. I thanked him and hung up. Then I waited. Time stretched in a weird way. Every minute felt thick, heavy, like the air before a storm. I kept imagining the airport, the fluorescent lights, the rolling suitcases, the tired travelers eager to get home. I imagined Ryan relaxed, thinking the worst had passed, thinking Mom would fold like always. I imagined Vanessa confident, rehearsing what she'd say to put me back in my place. Neither of them imagined handcuffs. I got the call an hour later. "Miss Margaret?" a calm male voice said. "This is Detective Collins. I'm calling to inform you that your son and his wife have been detained at the airport." Detained. Such a polite word for a life imploding. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I understand." They were approached after customs. There were questions. Then warrants were confirmed. I pictured it clearly. Ryan's confusion. Vanessa's outrage. The moment it clicked that they weren't in control anymore. I didn't feel joy. I felt finality. The detective continued, "You may be contacted for further statements, but for now, you are not required to do anything." "Thank you," I replied. After I hung up, I sat very still. Then I laughed. Not loud, not hysterical, just one small laugh that escaped my chest like a pressure valve finally releasing. They really thought they'd won. That evening, my phone exploded. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that shifted tone by the minute. First, confusion, then anger, then fear. Vanessa left a voicemail screaming that this was elder abuse, that I was being manipulated. Ryan sent messages begging me to fix it, promising everything, swearing he loved me. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I deleted them. That was another line crossed. I wasn't their emotional dumping ground anymore. Later that night, Arthur called again. "They're being held overnight," he said. "Charges will be formalized in the morning." "Okay," I replied. "You doing all right?" I thought about that question. Was I sad? Yes. Was I grieving? Absolutely. Was I broken? No. "I'm okay," I said. And for the first time in years, it was the truth. That night, I slept straight through. No tossing. No replaying conversations. No imaginary arguments in my head. Just sleep. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No calls, no messages, no demands. The world felt different. Not lighter, stronger. Over the next few days, details came out piece by piece. bank fraud, financial exploitation, conspiracy. Charges that stacked up higher than they ever expected. Vanessa tried to blame Ryan. Ryan tried to blame Vanessa. Neither took responsibility, exactly as I'd always known. People asked me how I felt. I told them the truth. I feel like I stopped drowning, because that's what this had been. Years of quiet drowning, while everyone told me to be patient, be understanding, be a good mother. Nobody tells you to be good to yourself. I visited the grocery store one afternoon and ran into a neighbor who'd always seen Ryan and Vanessa as perfect. "I heard what happened," she said carefully. I smiled politely. "Yes, it's been a lot." She hesitated. "I'm sorry." "So am I," replied, and meant it, just not the way she thought. That night, sitting alone in my living room, I finally allowed myself to say something out loud. My life is mine again, not because they were arrested, but because I stopped sacrificing myself on the altar of family loyalty. And as I looked around that quiet house, the same house where I'd been treated like an inconvenience, I realized something that sent a chill through me. Once the airport chaos was over, once the headlines died down, and the phone finally stopped buzzing, that's when the real weight of it all settled in. People think justice is loud. Flashing lights, courtrooms packed with drama, somebody yelling, "Objection." That's TV nonsense. Real justice is paperwork, waiting rooms, long pauses, and sitting alone with thoughts you can't distract yourself from anymore. A few days after Ryan and Vanessa were officially charged, I got my first letter from jail. Ryan's handwriting was the same as when he was a kid. Rushed, slanted, like he was always afraid he'd run out of space. "Mom, I don't understand how this went so far. Vanessa says her lawyer can fix it. Please talk to Arthur. Please tell them you don't want to press charges. I'm your son." I read it once. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't tear it up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. And my decision was silence. That silence hit him harder than any argument ever could. Over the following weeks, more information came out. Not from me, but from the investigation. Accounts I didn't even know existed. Transfers that didn't line up with anything they'd told me. Conversations between Vanessa and people I'd never met. It became clear real fast that I wasn't the first older person they'd helped manage finances. I was just the biggest one. Arthur explained it gently, but he didn't soften the truth. They weren't desperate, he said. They were organized. That sentence hurt more than the theft. Because desperation I could understand. Planning? That meant intent. Ryan hadn't fallen into this by accident. He'd stepped into it willingly, telling himself whatever story he needed so he could sleep at night. I stopped asking myself, where did I go wrong? That question assumes you control another adult's choices. You don't. Court dates were set. Lawyers circled like vultures. Vanessa's family suddenly remembered my phone number after years of ignoring me. Her sister called, voice sugary. "Margaret, this is all a misunderstanding. Vanessa's under a lot of stress." I cut her off. So was I when my safe was empty. Click. Another relative suggested family mediation, forgiveness, healing. Funny how people love forgiveness when it costs them nothing. At night, when the house was quiet, I thought about the future. Not theirs, mine. What did I want my life to look like? Without fear. Without manipulation, disguised as love. The answer surprised me. I wanted space. Distance. A place where my name wasn't whispered like a warning. So I started making plans. Not dramatic ones, practical ones. I met with Arthur about dissolving the trust completely. New accounts, new safeguards, legal walls so high nobody could climb them again. Every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, while sorting paperwork, I found an old photo tucked into a folder. Ryan at 10 years old. Missing 2 teeth, smiling wide. Smiling like the world hadn't taught him how to lie yet. I held it for a long time. Then I put it back. You're allowed to love who someone used to be, without sacrificing yourself to who they became. The first court hearing came faster than I expected. I didn't attend. I didn't need to see them in person to know the truth. Arthur called afterward. They're blaming each other, he said. Neither one is taking full responsibility. Of course they weren't. People who steal from their own parents rarely wake up with a conscience overnight. Weeks turned into months. My life slowed down in a good way. I started walking in the mornings, cooking real meals again instead of stress snacking, sleeping without that constant knot in my chest. One day, I realized something huge. I hadn't checked my phone in hours. No anxiety, no waiting for bad news, no bracing myself. That's when I knew I was healing. Another letter came from Ryan. This one longer, softer, full of apologies that sounded practiced. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because answering would pull me back into a role I'd quit. The fixer, the forgiver, the woman who absorbs damage so others don't have to. I wasn't her anymore. Vanessa tried once more. A letter filled with excuses, blaming trauma, blaming influence, blaming everyone but herself. That one went straight into the trash. Court dates continued. Evidence piled up. Every time Arthur updated me, the picture got uglier. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. And patterns don't change without consequences. One evening, sitting alone with a cup of tea, I said something out loud that shocked even me. I did the right thing. Not bravely, not angrily, just honestly. Because doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it just feels done. Outside, the sun was setting, casting that soft orange glow through my living room. The same room where I'd once overheard plans to erase me. Now it was quiet, mine. And even though the legal process wasn't finished yet, even though the future was still unfolding, one thing was already settled deep in my bones. I would never again confuse love with obligation. And whatever happened next, in court, in prison, in their lives, would happen without my sacrifice holding it together for them. That chapter of my life was closed, not with rage, with resolve. By the time the sentencing finally happened, I wasn't the same woman who'd found that note on the fridge. Back then, I was surviving minute to minute. Now, I was standing on solid ground. I didn't go to court on the final day. People always ask me why. Don't you want to see justice? Don't you want to look them in the eyes? No, justice isn't something you need to watch to believe in. It works whether you're sitting in the room or not. Arthur called me afterward. His voice was steady, professional, but there was something else under it. Finality. Margaret, he said, it's done. Ryan was sentenced. Vanessa too. Different charges, different timelines, but the same outcome. Accountability they never planned for. I thanked Arthur and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table and just breathed. No crying, no cheering, just breathing. Because what hit me in that moment wasn't victory. It was clarity. For years, my whole identity had been wrapped around being Ryan's mother. His safety net, his excuse, his soft landing. When that role was ripped away, I thought I'd disappear. Instead, I finally showed up. With Arthur's help, I regained full control of my finances. New accounts, new protections, legal boundaries so tight nobody could cross them again. Not family, not strangers, not anyone claiming to love me. The money came back piece by piece. Not just the savings, but my confidence, my authority, my right to say no without explaining myself. I sold the apartment. Some people thought that was extreme, but they didn't live inside those walls. They didn't hear the whispers of betrayal in every corner. That place held too many ghosts. A buyer offered a fair price. I accepted without hesitation. With the sale and my recovered savings, I had more money than I'd ever held in my life. And for the first time, money didn't feel like safety. It felt like responsibility. So I asked myself one hard question. What do you do when pain hands you power? You can hoard it, you can hide it, or you can turn it into something that outlives the damage. I chose the third option. I moved 3 hours away to a quiet coastal town where nobody knew my story. A small house, 2 bedrooms, a little garden, ocean air drifting through the kitchen window. Peace. But I didn't move alone. I used part of that money to create a temporary shelter, a safe place for older folks who'd been financially or emotionally abused by family. A place to breathe while they fought their battles. I hired a lawyer, a social worker, an accountant. My house became something bigger than me. The first person who walked through my door was Stella, 72, shaking hands, broken suitcase. Her daughter had drained her pension for years. You don't have to pay, I told her. You just have to rest and tell the truth. 3 months later, Stella got her pension back and her dignity with it. Then came Erica, 65. Her brother stole her house and left her living in her car. We fought for 6 months. She won. He went to prison. She now volunteers with me, helping others who arrive scared and silent. Every story I heard was a mirror of mine. Different faces, same betrayal. And every person I helped stitched me back together in ways therapy never could. Ryan wrote again from prison, asked for money, commissary, just a little help. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Helping him now would only undo the lesson he'd finally been forced to learn. One afternoon, a woman knocked on my door. Gray hair, tired eyes. She introduced herself as Clara, the sister of Vanessa's first husband, the man who died after changing his will. She hugged me and said, "Thank you for stopping her." In that moment, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying finally lifted. I hadn't destroyed my son. I'd refused to be destroyed with him. 2 years have passed since the day my life cracked in half. I'm 69 now. More wrinkles, fully gray hair, but I wake up every morning free. The shelter has helped over 20 people so far. Some cases we win, some we don't. But every person leaves knowing they weren't crazy, weak, or alone. Rachel, my old neighbor, moved here too. We walk the beach together, eat breakfast every Saturday. Chosen family hits different when it's built on respect. Ryan still has years left on his sentence. I haven't visited. I receive letters every few months. I keep them in a box. Maybe one day I'll read them all. Maybe not. Forgiveness doesn't run on anyone else's timeline. Last week, I gave a talk at a community center about financial protection for seniors. 200 people showed up. One woman cried afterward and told me her son was pressuring her to sign over her house. I gave her a lawyer's number, told her to trust her gut. 2 days later, she texted me, "You saved me." No, she saved herself. I just reminded her she was allowed to. These days, when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I don't see a victim. I see a woman who survived betrayal, turned pain into purpose, and learned the hardest lesson of all. Self-respect matters more than shared blood. They thought I'd cry alone. They thought I'd break. They thought I was just an old woman they could erase. They didn't know I'd been preparing. Not for revenge, for freedom. And if my story helped you see something clearer in your own life, if it reminded you that it's never too late to protect yourself, to choose dignity, to walk away from what's hurting you, then do me one favor. Subscribe, not for me, for the stories that remind us we're not weak, we're not disposable, and we're damn sure not finished yet. Because we seniors, we're survivors, and we're just getting started.